talk about the attic. Attics, there's really two different types of roof frames in a building. There's either rafters or they're trusses. With the building that I'm in today, these are trusses. Trusses are manufactured in a woodworking shop or a factory, put on a truck, they're shipped over to the job site. A crane will take them off the truck or a loader will take them off the truck, put them on the roof, and then they'll stack them and get them all laid out. That's what you see behind me here. Okay? These are all your trusses that make the roof frame, and you can see them all the way to the back. The reason you know they're a truss is all the cross bracing that you have in between. A rafter, the only thing that you would see here on the rafter is just the wood going from the side of the building wall up to the ridge beam or to the peak of the roof. So in terms of what you have in this house here, these are definitely trusses. They're very beefy trusses too. Usually these are 2x3s with some 2x4s here and there. These are actually 2x3s with caps on them. So they're almost like a T-board. So very strong in terms of what I'm looking for in here. One of the first things you always notice when you go into an attic is odor. If there's a pest living in an attic, usually you can smell them, whether it's raccoons, squirrels, birds, bats. The feces that you smell from pests is usually it stinks. You can smell it. So first thing you always notice when you get into an attic is the odor. Secondly, as I go through here and I check all the trusses, I'm looking for any of the truss cords that might have bent and snapped. Maybe when they were getting lifted up onto the roof, they hit the truss beside it and broke it. And you definitely don't see that in here. Secondly, you look for things like mold. I'm actually going to grab my flashlight so that I can shine it back here better. Okay, so hopefully you can now see this a little bit better. Okay, so you can see your trusses here. You always want to look up at the plywood. If there's any mold in the building, I don't know if you can see it back over here. This is your plywood over in here. Okay, you can see my shadow on the plywood in the back. If there was any mold in here, you'd see millions of little black pin spots. The little black pin spots, they just take over. Everything is just black in color with millions of little black pin spots. And you don't see that anywhere, so that looks fine. As you're looking at all the plywood, you're also looking for water leaks. Okay, any signs that water has leaked through anywhere, and you don't see that, I am going to hop right back into the attic when I'm not making this video and take a good look. It is good practice to try and get as far into an attic as you possibly can. That way, sometimes you get insulation that's blown back from the soffit that you might not notice it until you walk over there. So I will do that as well. Other things you're looking for in here as well is the insulation. So the insulation in this attic is fiberglass. It is blown in fiberglass. I like fiberglass. It's nice and heavy and it's a good insulator. Also over the years, this house was 9 to 10 years old. You can tell this is still very, very rigid. Okay? With some of the other types of insulation, I find that over the years it gets kind of damp. As it gets damp, it gets heavy and it sinks. So let's say you started off at about 16 to 18 inches of insulation. After about 10 years, it's almost half of that. With fiberglass, you can see, there's 16 inches of insulation in here and it hasn't compressed at all. So that's one of the reasons I like fiberglass. Things you want to do in here, you want to dig through the insulation and reach down to the bottom to feel for vapor barrier. You want to make sure there's vapor barrier in there. So in terms of the insulation in here, there's definitely enough of it. With 16 inches of fiberglass, that's a lot of insulation. That's roughly R50. Any signs of pests? Have mice or raccoons or squirrels been walking around on there and compressed all that insulation down? Usually with pests you can smell them as well, and you don't smell anything foul. You don't smell anything rotten and stinky like feces, and you don't see compressed insulation where they've been walking around. So that's good. In terms of the house I'm in right now, the insulation is definitely in good shape. So let's talk about the sheathing in the attic. This is plywood. Okay, you're going to get either a strand board like aspenite or you're going to get plywood in attics. Things that you're really looking for when you're looking at the sheathing, you're looking for mold. So with mold, little black pin spots that just take over. It turns everything black when you get mold. And this is fine. You definitely don't see any signs of that anywhere. You're also looking for any signs that there have been water leaks. So water leaks, you would see the stain. Okay, there's a joint right here, so H-clip. H-clip keeps the two pieces of plywood flush with each other. If there was a leak, a lot of the times what will happen is where this joint is, water will start to soak through that, or it will get onto a truss and follow a truss. And you can usually see the drip line and where the water has really soaked into the plywood and the 2x4s and things like that. And you don't see that. So in terms of the sheathing, this is good. When it comes to ventilation in an attic, if you don't have proper ventilation, your attic will get very hot, which can damage the shingles. It will cook the shingles from the bottom. It will cause your air conditioning and heating bills to be more expensive. But most importantly, it can cause mold. Without proper ventilation, you will get moisture that builds up inside the attic, and then that moisture causes your plywood to start to go moldy. With this one right here, if you can see where my shadow is, right there, I'm trying to point at it, sorry, where my shadow is, right there. Do you see that little piece of pink styrofoam sticking through? That's what's called a soffit baffle, or a moor vent. Those are there to let the air come up through the soffit into the attic. By doing that, you're bringing fresh air into the house. As that air comes in, it warms up, it picks up the moisture, and then it goes out through the roof vents at the top of the house, or a gable vent if it's a gabled roof. In terms of soffit baffles, you always want to see soffit baffles, especially on houses like this one where the insulation thickness, it's very thick, it's 15 inches thick. So without that, your insulation would fall down into the soffit, block the airflow, and then you'd have problems with heating and air conditioning costs and mold problems, okay, and premature wear in your shingles. So ventilation is very important when you're going through an attic.